You walk into the church singles event and you wonder, where are the men? It's not that single, godly men over 35 aren't there. In fact, over 23% of US adults aged 30 to 49 are single. And among men, it's about 27%. And right now, there's an astonishing phenomenon about women. There are now more women in their 40s having babies than teenagers for the first time ever in US history. If singles over 35 are thriving, why are men missing in action at church-sponsored singles events across America? Picture this, a room with 100 women surging with estrogen excitement at this singles mixer. 6 men are volunteering to serve at the event as ushers, security, and parking professionals. And 4 men had the audacity and the courage to buy same-day tickets at the door. Those men, God bless them, they're like wounded gazelles in the Serengeti, surrounded, outnumbered, and unsure where they sit. I promise I have another story for you, and the one coming is both sexy and holy. You're welcome. I've spoken to dozens of godly, driven men who want more than just to show up, but they've got reasons why they don't. This right here is the conversation that's long overdue. I'm echoing what singles feel, but rarely hear voiced aloud. Stick around, and this episode will feel like a sigh of relief. And for some, it'll be a call to action. There are 3 places you'll find men, and it's not where you think. But trust me, you'll find them there. Loads of them. And if there's one thing that drives women nuts, it's the first place is cultural expectations. Proverbs 23 verse 7 says, "For as he thinks in his heart, so is he." Let's unpack the first location, because if you're asking, where are the men? I'll tell you. Some of them are camping out in a place called cultural expectation. This is where men silently wrestle with the pressure of performance and spiritual expectations that never quite fit. And it's not just about men showing up, it's about where and how they show up. In the US, about 27% of men ages 30 to 49 are single, compared to 19% of women in the same age group. So what gives? I found a data point from Barna and Glue. In 2024, 30% of men reported attending weekly services, compared to 27% of women, marking a gender flip from previous decades. Historically, women attended more frequently, 47 versus 38% of men, around the year 2000. That means there are more men in church than ever before, which totally debunks the tired narrative that there aren't enough men going to church. There are plenty, but where are the eligible men desiring marriage and children? Well, remember those wounded gazelles in the Serengeti? They're outnumbered, under pressure, and undercover. They walk into a room with 90% women, and they're thinking, I don't have a strategy to even start talking. I don't know if I measure up spiritually. I'm just here to show God I care, but I'm believing early. That's where fear kicks in, not just fear of rejection, it's the fear of a stampede. I'm sorry, that's funny. It's fear of overwhelm, fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of not measuring up, and not just to a woman's expectations, but to his own expectations. He has to be the man, the initiator, while women are dropping handkerchiefs left and right. He has to be the provider, the primary breadwinner, while women have high-powered careers and are building a future vibing with or without you energy. He has to be the lion and the lamb and have deep knowledge of the word. But women have theological degrees and color code their Bible highlighters. There are more men camped out and undercover in cultural expectations than there are donuts on the pegged donut wall on the way to the main sanctuary. Now hang on, because I've located more men. Ladies, stock up the hankies. Welcome to the next location where men are. The second place men are isn't physical. It's internal. It's quiet, but it's constant. This location, it's called fear of not measuring up. Some men, they live here like it's a gated community. HOA fees include spiritual anxiety and the invisible pressure to pray with your eyes closed. This is a place where men start sizing themselves up before they ever pursue a woman. They don't ghost out of arrogance. They ghost because they're doing the math in their head and they're coming up short. I like her, but I don't make six figures yet. I want to lead her spiritually, but she probably has a prayer journal, a spiritual director, and a direct line to the throne room. What if I disappoint her? What if she finds out that I'm not as spiritually mature as I look on Sunday? And if that sounds all too familiar, in a minute, I'm going to unpack the one silent fear most men won't even admit to their closest friends and how it shows up in their decisions without them even realizing it. We're back at the gated community. This is not about immaturity. It's about a man confronting the gap between who he wants to be and who he currently is. And sometimes the gap is brutal. This isn't just insecurity. The world calls it imposter syndrome. The Bible calls it an identity crisis. And it's heavy because while she's quoting Proverbs 31, she's living in Romans 7. The good I want to do, I don't do. And the stuff I swore I was done with, somehow it's still on my phone, still on my mind, and still in my shadow. That one silent fear most men won't admit to is this. What if the real me falls short? What if what I'm doing isn't enough, not strong enough, not spiritual enough, not stable enough, not healed enough? And because he's never said it out loud, he's haunted by it quietly. It shows up in how he hesitates to text her back. It shows up in how he overanalyzes every prayer request. It shows up in how he convinces himself that she deserves better, even if he's never asked her what she actually desires. This is the gap between who he wants to be and who he thinks he has permission to be. And what about that gated community? He's not hiding because he doesn't love God. And it's not because he feels that God is disappointed in him. He's hiding because he's disappointed in himself. And if he feels insecure in himself, how could he possibly provide security for her? All right, we're overdue for a story, and I got one coming, I promise. That's sexy and holy. So what does he do? He performs. He leads the small group. He joins the worship team. He holds the door open, smiles wide, and serves like a machine. But when it comes to her, his mouth gets dry, his heart gets loud, his underarms are sweaty, and his voice goes quiet because now it's personal. It's not just about serving anymore. It's about showing up. And showing up, honestly, requires something performance can't produce: inner confidence, spiritual clarity, and emotional resilience. This is where the real difference lies between a man who performs and a man who can pursue. One is trying to earn approval, and the other is equipped for pursuit, and she can feel the difference. And if there's one thing that drives women nuts, it's when a man's actions betray his words. All right, here's the story. Let's travel back to the past and visit a youth group that I was invited to speak to on the topic of biblical sexual integrity. Now, picture about 50 high school students sitting on the floor, cross-legged, crisscross applesauce, trying not to look awkward. When I finished my core message, my version of the sex ed talk, I opened the floor for Q&A. All the boys sat lined up, kind of in like the back rows of the floor seating, where the girls were right up front, heads tilted and eyes locked. Then a few hands went up. And one sweetie pie, darling girl, you know this type. Straight A's, says please and thank you, probably does algebra for fun. She raises her hand and asks, "What about porn?" And I thought, okay, well, let's do this. Let's be clear, this is not the same context as Porn and Pancakes from episode 3 on what she wants to know about your battle with porn. I'll provide the link so you can catch that episode. This moment, it was powerful because here's what I told them. What you have to know about porn is that it's not real. Porn is a performance, a production. It's called adult entertainment because it's scripted. What they're pretending to do is not what God designed. It's a counterfeit. I asked the room, raise your hand if you want a hot wife or hot husband someday. Giggling erupts. Hands go up across the room, and some slow and some confidently. They weren't sure if this was a setup. It wasn't. I told them, you have permission to be honest. See, what the world pretends to have is not the real deal. What God designed between a husband and a wife is both sexy and holy. And that's hot. Laughter, nods, high fives in the back. Just like that, they got it. In just a bit, I'm going to show you how this same performance pressure hijacks a man's ability to lead a woman with confidence because he's secretly afraid the real him won't be enough. But for now, bookmark this. Performance pressure happens when we try to be or do anything that God didn't design. And whether it's a platform, a relationship, or a DM you're about to send, if you're performing instead of operating from presence, you'll feel the disconnect before anyone else does. There's a kind of whisper you need to urgently respond to, or you'll risk going around this mountain again and again. In the Kingdom Singles brand, we aim to accelerate your path to marriage and multiplication in the most kingdom way possible. Acceleration happens when the path is clear. You're listening now because you recognize that A, you want acceleration, and B, you need to clear your path in the most kingdom way possible. So how does performance pressure hijack a man's ability to lead with confidence? Here's how. When a man performs, he's managing perception. When a man leads, he's risking vulnerability. When a man performs, he's managing perception. When a man leads, he's risking vulnerability. Performance says, I have to keep the image intact. But confidence says, even if my voice shakes, I'll still speak. He overfunctions in public, but underfunctions in pursuit. He'll lead a devotional with 10 people, but he can't lead a 10-minute FaceTime with her because the pressure of getting it right has replaced the posture of showing up real. A man can't lead a woman if he's afraid that she'll meet the script version of him and be disappointed by the real one. That's the hijack. There is a fear that doesn't scream, it whispers. She deserves a better man. If I mess this up, I'll ruin her walk. If I open my mouth and don't have all the answers, I'll look like a fraud. Next, we're talking about what happens when this whisper turns into withdrawal, and why ghosting isn't cowardice acting alone, it's colluding with confusion. And the third chord of this ungodly trinity is shame. But here's the truth. She's not looking for perfection. She's believing for pursuit. But he doesn't know that because no one's told him that his internal audit doesn't match her actual expectations. He thinks she wants a bishop. She just wants a man with a backbone and a Bible, not a podcast host, not a life group legend, just a grown man who knows how to pray and pump gas without second guessing himself. We're starting with the basics, y'all. And until someone shows him that, he stays tucked away in this gated community called fear of not measuring up, doing inventory, questioning everything, trying not to get audited. So what happens when a whisper goes unchecked? It turns into withdrawal. The man who used to reply within minutes now waits hours or days or disappears altogether. He doesn't stop caring. He just gets overwhelmed by the pressure of what he thinks he's expected to be. And when that inner voice whispers, "You're not enough," or conversely, "She's too much," it's easier to vanish than to voice it. Withdrawal becomes his way of staying in control, because if he exits first, he might save her from a greater disappointment later by delivering a smaller disappointment now. Ultimately, he'll still need to reckon with disappointing himself. Hang tight, because there's one more luxury destination where Mr. Right could be. And what's next? The Super Bowl halftime show. That third place is spiritual dryness. Jeremiah 17 verses 7 and 8 says, "But blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. They will be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries in a year of drought and never fails to bear fruit." Let's visit this third place where men are. You won't see it on Google Maps, but spiritually, it's a desert. Men frequent a place called spiritual dryness. Now, don't get this twisted. This is not about being backslidden. This isn't about abandoning God. This is the man who still goes to church, still reads the verse of the day, and still serves on Sundays. But if you really looked underneath the surface, he's spiritually parched. He looks planted, but inside, he's thirsty. He can quote a verse, but he hasn't felt God's voice in a while. His devotionals feel dry. His prayers feel recycled. And when it comes to dating, he's on autopilot, not anointing. I liken this to the male equivalent of the luteal phase. These are the men who don't fear when heat comes because they're planted by the water and their leaves are always green. At least they are on the outside. All right, let me take you to 2020 Los Angeles, Super Bowl Sunday. I'm at a watch party with my church community group, mostly married couples, 35-ish and up, with babies crawling around and chili in the crock pot. Then halftime hits. Spotlights go up, and there they are, J-Lo and Shakira in rhinestone fringe, heels, pole, wind machine, and the hips didn't lie, and you could feel it. Wives shifting in their seats, husbands glued to that 80-inch 4K screen. One wife mutters, "This is not what 50-year-old women look like." And I wanted to tap her on the shoulder and say, "Except in LA, it kind of is." See, these two women represent existing and future generations of women. Every woman at that watch party in Los Angeles was a hot mama, minus the rhinestone fringe and the pole. They're fit, fine, and fertile, faith-filled, some still single, still slaying, still stunning. And for a lot of Christian men, this is where spiritual dryness meets visual saturation. At the very least, eligible kingdom men are visually oversaturated. Spiritually undernourished or overnourished, and ill-equipped to discern the difference between attraction and alignment. The high-impact image saturation is exhausting and understandably leads to a real lack of spiritual stamina. Now, check out episode 4 called Attraction versus Distraction: How to Attract Who You Want, Not Who You Don't. Do you keep attracting the wrong ones and repelling the right one? Knowing the difference between attraction, distraction, and detraction is your accelerator to identify why your current season might be blocking who is meant to walk into your next one. I'll leave that episode 4 link for you right here. All right, welcome to the wilderness. This is what spiritual dryness sounds like. I don't even know what to pray anymore. I'm tired of asking God and hearing silence. I want a wife, but I don't want to fake the spiritual leadership I wish I had. Men don't talk about this out loud, but it's there. They show up to church, sing the songs, high-five the greeters, but internally, it's dry. And dry seasons lead to desperate decisions. But how do we diagnose spiritual dryness in the seemingly most eligible Christian men? There are 4 clear signs of spiritual dryness, particularly in dating scenarios. 1, he performs, not pursues. He mimics spiritual depth instead of cultivating it. 2, he panics when it gets real. When conversations go from surface to sacred, he deflects or disappears, also known as the slow fade. 3, he confuses peace with passivity. He hides behind waiting on the Lord when he's actually avoiding accountability. 4, he has vision but no vehicle. He can dream about the future but can't sustain the process that would build it. When hosting the Kingdom Singles Brand Collective members and group challenges, clear patterns emerge in the process, and I've finally identified a culprit. The number one roadblock that holds eligible men hostage and delays their progress, can you guess what it is? Now hold that thought while I button up an earlier point to set that up for you. About that ungodly trinity between cowardice, confusion, and shame, let's call it by its despicable nickname, ghosting. Why do men ghost good women? What if it's not because they don't care? What if it's not because they're playing games, but because spiritual dryness plus oversaturation equals emotional overwhelm? Emotional overwhelm, simply put, is a lack of spiritual stamina. Spiritual stamina is powered by God's presence. Cowardice means afraid and lacking courage. Confusion means vagueness and uncertainty. Shame means the feeling of humiliation or sense of disgrace. In essence, ghosting translated means A, I don't have the capacity or courage to communicate. B, I don't have the clarity or certainty to respond. C, I don't have the conviction or honor to act respectfully. It's not rejection, it's retreat. Sometimes it's mercy disguised as a disappearing act. This is true in the reverse when women acquiesce and deploy the slow fade. Allow me to present this in a professional context. Your resume, among hundreds of possible candidates, was compelling enough to garner a first interview. The interview was a spectacular time learning about the company's vision, and you even learn about the person whose position they're seeking to fill because that person has been promoted. All good things. They mention the strong competition among the candidates, which you're numbered among, and you feel pretty confident with their feedback. Then a couple of days later, you receive a call from recruiting thanking you for your time. and that they've decided to pursue another candidate who's already accepted the position. But they wanted to follow up with you personally because they equally felt you were a strong candidate that they would like to consider in the future should the opportunity arise. They close by recognizing that they'll likely see you again since it's a niche industry, and they're certain that your success will continue and that they'll be seeing you again, possibly at the national conference. Now let's contrast that with the close of the first interview and back that up with an even powerful second interview, maybe even a panel interview. And days go by and your follow-up emails are not returned. Weeks go by and now you're left to presume that they say those positive things in all their interviews. One is thoughtful, gracious, and goes beyond industry standard to honor your time and accomplishments personally and graciously, while the other speaks volumes about the company's standard of practice and inevitably their culture. Which of these standards of practice are the most kingdom way possible? In just a moment, I'll show you how all this connects to the deeper root system and how spiritual dryness has a solution that doesn't start with behavior. It starts with clarity. Are you ready with your guess from earlier? Fill in the blank. The number one roadblock that holds eligible men hostage and delays their progress is indecision. When a perfectly eligible kingdom man seeks refuge in any one of these luxury destinations that cater to his every whim, 1. Cultural expectations, 2. Fear of not measuring up, 3. Spiritual dryness. The outcome is indecision. When I lived in California, this was widely known as Peter Pan syndrome. While outwardly there's a busy facade of high performance, the mindset is stunted growth and regression that inhabits its host. There's a root system here. Not exactly laziness and not exactly rebellion, but a lack of clarity. Indecision is actually not the root problem. It's the symptom. The deeper issue is this: misalignment within himself, which manifests as a lack of integrity and follow-through. Simply put, his actions don't align with his words. This operating system is buggy and prone to instability. And without clarity, even the most eligible kingdom man ends up wandering, not because he's a bad man, but because he's lost inside the right intentions. Let's review and give you everything you need to know using the P.A.S. copywriting framework. Problem, agitation, solution. The problem? Many ask, where are the men? Not realizing men are present, but in 3 locations hidden in plain sight. Cultural expectations, emotional gaps, and spiritual dryness cause men to show up in disguise, or not at all. Women assume absence equals apathy or lack of interest or enthusiasm, but men are navigating internal battles that often go unspoken and unaddressed. The agitation, cultural expectations. Men feel like they have to be everything all at once: provider, pastor, prophet, protector, and it keeps them paralyzed. Fear of not measuring up. Men ghost not from arrogance, but from anxiety. The inner voice says, I'm not enough for her, and I still have work to do. In contrast, she's not enough for me, and she has work to do. Then they proceed to do the thing they don't want, and not the things they do want. Spiritual dryness. Even the most outwardly churchy men are seasonally dry on the inside, visually overstimulated, spiritually undernourished, feeling alone and unaccountable, or spiritually overnourished as lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. The solution: clarity over performance. Clarity clears the path for confidence. Performance is a substitute. Presence is the invitation. And pursuit, that's her confirmation. Reframed expectations. He doesn't have to be perfect. He just has to be planted. She wants pursuit, not perfection. To stand out among the vacillators is to first be sure within himself, and second, to be sure about her. Surety is to possess a high degree of certainty, rehydration from the word, and accountability. Spiritual dryness doesn't require better behavior. It needs deeper roots, consistent spiritual nutrients, and brotherly honesty. Let me ask you this. What if every man listening can find out exactly which location you're planted in? What if that clarity could help clear the path to your next right step with women, with God, and even with yourself? Bob Proctor, who says, quote, "Life happens either by design or by default. You choose. If you're not living by design, you're living by default. You can do what you want to do, not what you don't. To do this, you need 2 essential location pins. Know where you are and begin with the end in mind. When you identify where you are, you can discern where God is leading you next. We have something in the works that'll give you exactly that clarity, but that's a breadcrumb for another episode. Up next is episode 1, You Are Single Because. There are only 2 explanations for why 35 and over Christians are still single today. You're single for a season, or you're single for a reason. So what are your thoughts? Where are the men? Where are you? We'll meet you in the comments. Until next time, remember, you're not single by accident. Your singleness is not happening to you, it's happening for you.